take chances, go places, explore this country as much as you can. When I went to New York City, you know, I suffered a lot, and I didn't know how it would end, and I fell on my back, and I ended up circling back home. But those 2.5 years that I lived in New York City, they became a significant part of the Haygoods of Columbus, of the family memoir, my third book. And so, as Hemingway said, that which doesn't break you makes you stronger. And so the New York City experience made me stronger. And it was yet another story that I could look back on and write about. I think that's a key word, feeling. I'm a writer who feels, and I'll give you an example. My grandparents raised me mostly. I lived with them much of my young adult life. And so at the Washington Post, where I was a national reporter starting in 2002, I was in the newsroom when the Hurricane Katrina struck down in New Orleans. And so I was sent there, and I ended up being there for 33 straight days. And if you're on the ground in a crisis situation like that, the newspaper expects you to come up with fresh story ideas every day. And just your juice as a writer, you know that the New York Times is going to have something on the front page, in the LA Times, and the Chicago Tribune, and so you want to have something to make your newspaper proud too. So one day I'm riding around, and this goes to filling, I'm riding around New Orleans, and I see these elderly ladies standing in a line. And over about 3 days, I kept seeing these long lines of elderly women. And they were standing in line to get food so that their daughters could go out and try to find work. And I said to myself, the grandmothers of New Orleans are keeping this city alive. And I wrote that story, and it was a big story. And I think I wrote that story because those grandmothers made me think of the grandmother who raised me. So I think it's filling for writers means a whole lot. I don't think brutal dictators could ever be wonderful writers because they just have no feeling. I mean, I think a lot of writing, to me at least, is the heart. I generally am driven to write research stories that I haven't seen yet. That really is what drives me. I want something new. I want a new angle. Newspaper editors or book editors, they just want good stories. I mean, they flat out, I mean, for instance, when I was at the Boston Globe, I was a feature writer, you know, on the arts desk. So, and I envied the national reporters, and because they could get on an airplane and fly to Texas or Memphis and do a story. And I would go, wow, man, they are flying off to do a story. And I remember vividly in 1983, it was the 1984, it was the 20th anniversary of the Mississippi murders of James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, who had been murdered in Mississippi. during the civil rights movement. And so there's a hook there, 20th anniversary. And I'm constantly thinking in the newsroom, I've got to get on a plane. I've got to get an assignment where the editor can look at me and say, Haygood, go. Get on the plane. And so I walked over to this editor, Royal Ford was his name, and I said, Royal, do you know that next week is the 20th anniversary of the Mississippi murders of the 3 voting rights activists who were murdered? And he said, no, I didn't. And I said, I think we should do a story. And how about if I find one of the families, I could go and write about them all these years after the tragedy and see what they're thinking right now. And he said, hey, that's a great idea. I'll see you when you get back. Bam! And that was my first assignment. I remember heading out to the airport, and I had my press card, and I had some expense money from the newspaper. I had never had expense money. It was like $100 over 3 days, and they said, hey, here's some expense money if something happens. And I said, wow. I mean, and I went and traveled and found the family of Michael Schwerner and wrote a story about him. And it made me feel so good because now I was on my way. Now I could go to that national editor with other story ideas, and he wouldn't flinch to send me on the road. Everybody in the newsroom wants to be on the front page. Everybody wants to be on the national staff. Everybody wants to be noticed. And so I figured all my life I had come up with my own ideas. I mean, I came up with an idea to apply to the Upward Bound program. I got accepted, and I arrived on this campus. I mean, I think having the wherewithal to come up with those ideas, especially if you're in writing. Writing is storytelling. Good writing is good storytelling. And good storytelling is finding the good story.